hotel bills.
That's right.
In hotel bills.
That's right.
And welcome to the Tucson History Museum and the launch of Ray's new book, Fearless, Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur. I guarantee it's going to be an interesting and entertaining presentation, and I must add on a personal note, I am very proud of the author. So now let's get this show on the road, and now to start things off, I'm going to give you a guy that needs no introduction, Mr. Guy Atchley.
Hello, testing.
Thank you very much.
No microphone, you got to yell. Sorry about that.
Did your company build that?
Yes.
Okay.
It was in an infomercial once.
Sandy sat down by me back there and said, "You look familiar. Anybody else here have that issue?" Been said a few times. I retired this year after 34 years at K-Gun 9. I started there in 1984. And I don't want to say that the person I'm introducing today is old, but he was working as an announcer at K-Gun 9 24 years before I started. Of course, he was very young at the time. Ray Lindstrom was
double
just
A.
18 years old in 1960. It's not true that he and Marconi were classmates. Forbes magazine called him an indefatigable promoter. USA Today said he was a visionary. The Hollywood Reporter referred to him as a man of destiny.
Oh.
He has made frequent appearances on the NBC Today Show, the CBS Evening News, and CBS Sunday Morning. But before Ray Lindstrom became a nationally famous marketing entrepreneur, he grew up in Tucson and, as you know, was part of the radio TV scene here in the 1950s and 60s. Lindstrom, a graduate of Catalina High School and the University of Arizona, is credited with being the man who gave us the ubiquitous TV infomercial. He says when you change the channels on late night TV and see one long commercial program after another selling things you don't need, you can blame him. After starting more than 100 businesses, he's back in Tucson attempting to retire, but not doing a very good job of it. He's written a book, Fearless, Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur. It's a 320-page tale of a guy who just couldn't stop starting businesses. An interesting combination of memoir, business, self-help, history, humor, philosophy, and psychology. Here to tell you more is the author, Ray Lindstrom.
You know, I feel better with a microphone in my hand, really. I feel very at home with that. So, unfortunately, I should just hold it, and you guys can hear me okay, can't you? Yeah. No problem with that? Okay. You know, I mentioned at the book festival, the one thing that every place you go, they're always screwing around with the microphone. Does this thing work? And right here, I said, that's not going to happen. It happened. What can I say? You know, this is my book. You know, somebody saw this book. By the way, is the lighting okay for me, or should I go back? Is it okay? It's okay. Speak louder, please. You know, this is about as loud as I can speak. Who is that said that? My wife. This is the book. It's called Fearless, Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur. And somebody the other day, I showed this to them, and they said, "Oh, that looks like a real book." Well, it is a real book. Look, it's got a nice shiny cover. It's got nice hardbound book, and it's 320 pages. I don't know, from what he was saying, I almost had the feeling that, you know, that most people these days, you know, just mimeograph things and pass them out or something. But this is a real book. Now, you know, the title of this book is Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur, and I am not crazy about the word entrepreneur. Entrepreneur it's a long word. It's not very good. But, you know, I looked in the thesaurus and tried to find a better word. There is no better word than entrepreneur. Entrepreneur means a guy that starts businesses, or a gal who starts, a person who starts businesses. And that was me, because in my life, I've started over 100 different businesses because I just love to start businesses. Didn't like to run them, didn't like to manage, but I like to start businesses, and that's what this book is all about. And what Guy Atchley said, this is a combination memoir, business, self-help, history, humor, philosophy, and psychology book. Now, one of the things I want to first read something to you, because I think this is really important, and you realize what an entrepreneur is, okay? Where are my glasses here? Somewhere, thank you. No microphone doesn't work, I can't find my glasses. These are the first words of my book. For over 20 years, Michael Eisner was president of the Walt Disney Company. He oversaw a vast worldwide empire, including amusement parks and major television networks. During the height of his reign, he was reputed to earn over $40 million. For the last 5 years, Maria Gomez has been in the fruit business. Every morning, she goes to the wholesale fruit market in downtown Los Angeles and buys a box of bananas. Then she pushes her cart, selling bananas to businesses and people on the streets in downtown Los Angeles. At the end of the day, she's made a profit. And that's how she earns her living. Michael Eisner, even though he makes $40 million a year, is an employee of the Walt Disney Company. He serves at the pleasure of the board of directors. He didn't start the company. At any time, the board can ask for his resignation. Maria started her own business. She works for herself. Nobody can fire her. She's her own boss. If she wants to buy a few plantains to go with the bananas, she doesn't have to ask anybody's permission. She makes the decision. Maria is an entrepreneur. Michael Eisner is an employee. Only a person with an entrepreneurial mind can appreciate this and understand why I think Maria is much better off than Michael Eisner. It has more to do with freedom than money. But if you can put freedom and money together, then you've really got something. And that's basically what this book is all about. You know, I grew up here in Tucson, and I lived out in Tanque Verde, and I went to high school at Catalina High School. And when I was riding the bus to school every day, I ran into a guy. His name was Bert Schneider. This is Bert. This is my buddy. He and I went to high school on the. He and I went to high school every day on the bus, and we discovered that we had something in common, and that one thing we had in common was we wanted to be on the radio. We wanted to be disc jockeys. And his parents, they owned a school, a very fancy boarding school way out east called Tree Haven School. And movie stars' kids would go to the school, rich people's kids would go to the school, but Bert, he was pretty clever. He rigged up some speakers inside all the rooms, all the sleeping rooms there, so he could actually have his own radio station. He broadcast in the rooms. Well, when I became his buddy, I could go out there and I could broadcast in those rooms too. Well, we just wanted to be on the radio. At Catalina High School, we gave the announcements. We played records during lunch hour. We did all those kind of things. And we finally got our big break in broadcasting in 1958 when we were 15 years old, and we got a job at the only FM station in town. In those days, nobody listened to FM. It was all AM radio. And Mert and I were on KTKT FM playing classical music when we were 15 years old. We weren't even old enough to drive. Our parents had to bring us to the radio station. And we were awful. And we were volunteers. We were working for free. And we were so bad that we were working for free and we were afraid we were going to get fired. But you know, Bert had a classical music background, and it was, you know, he and his parents would on Saturday night they'd listen to opera on the radio. Well, in our family we would listen to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio. So I didn't know the classics, so I would get out there and I would say, okay, here now Pablo Casals will now play the cello, or here's another big hit tune from Wagner, you know. See, this is a very sophisticated audience. You know what I was doing there, right? But anyway, that was our first job, and you know, we were just a couple of kids in high school, and we just loved it. We would hang around radio stations. I mean, we'd just walk in. You know, there's no security in those days. We'd walk in, and the disc jockeys were really nice to us. You know, they'd tell us, you know, about how they did things and the music and all that sort of thing. So, you know, we really got to learn a lot about radio. But one day we were at a high school dance in 1959. Not together, I think we probably had dates or something, didn't we? Or was it just you and me? I'm not sure about that, you know. My brain's a little fuzzy. But anyway, and there was a guy up there, one of our classmates, his name was Jack Wallace, and he had this group called the High Tones. If anybody remembers Jack Wallace and the High Tones. Well, anyway, he was up there, he was singing, he was playing the guitar, he was kind of like Elvis, you know. And the girls in the audience, they were screaming and just having a great time. And I turned to Bert and I said, you know what? We ought to start a record company and record him. And Bert says, yeah, that's a great idea. So, okay, in those days, you know, a record company was really kind of an interesting thing. It was a very simple marketing procedure. You made a record, you took the record to the radio station played the record, kids heard the record, then they went down to the record store and bought it, and you sold the records to the music store, and then they paid you for it. I mean, that was the whole deal. It was very simple. You know, I'm talking about those old black records, you know, with the big holes in the middle. You all remember those, don't you? I think you're all old enough probably to remember those, except maybe a few people may. Maybe Robin, you're a little too young for that, right? Did you ever have a 45 RPM record? Oh, you did. Oh, that's good. Okay. Anyway, well, you know, okay, so I told you what the marketing concept was, and it was the first time it was my first real big business. I had carnivals when I was a kid and everything, but this was my first real business. And, you know, I told you the marketing system, and the marketing system was fairly simple, except for the fact there was only one thing there wasn't. How do you make a record? I didn't know how you made a record. How did you do that? You know, I got it. You know, you take it to the station and they play it, blah, blah, blah. How do you make a record? So I went home for lunch one day and I called up to Phoenix. There was a record pressing company up there called Jay Wakefield. And I called him up and I said, hi, Mr. Wakefield. I'm Ray Lindstrom. I go to high school in Tucson and I want to make a record. And how do could you tell me how to do it? He was very nice, and in 2 minutes, he explained, he says, well, you don't have a recording studio in Tucson, there's one in Phoenix, come on, bring your group up here, then I'll record it, I'll put it on tape, and we'll take that, and we'll go ahead, and then we'll put it on, you tell us what you want on the label, and we'll press up as many copies as you want, and there you go. And did they find that microphone yet, or not? Oh, Jay's out there, okay. Anyway, so I found out how to make the record, and we went up and we made the record. And we not only made that record, but we made 3 other records by other groups. Pete Ronstadt and the Night Beats and King Rock and the Knights, and we actually made 4 records while we were in our senior year in high school. And the deal is, and I've got to tell you this, that, you know, in this great book, it's going to be the greatest seller since Don Quixote, which I found out was the best-selling book. The best-selling novel of all the way. This isn't a novel. Well, anyway, so in this book are 22 Lindstrom's Laws, valuable tips if anybody wants to start a business from scratch. And my first #1 thing in this book is you don't have to know anything about the business you're going to go in, but you have to ask. ASK, always seek knowledge. That's the first thing you do. A couple of high school kids here, we learned how to make records just by calling somebody and asking them. How tough is that? But you know, we had to do it. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, what is your term for success? Well, people will ask, did you make a lot of money with Zoom Records, our record company? And I say, we didn't make any money. We lost money. Well, then you were a failure. You weren't a success. And I say, that's not true. To my way of thinking, a success is when you have an idea and you follow through and you produce whatever you want to. Whether you make money or not is beside the point. It's nice to make money. I would rather make money with it, but just being able to do it, to complete the project. You know, we wanted to make a record, we made records. And even to this day, we're still known, as old as we get. Bert and Ray are known as those 2 kids that owned Zoom Records at Catalina High School. It's probably our claim to fame, you know. It really is. It's phenomenal. But that was success as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, you know, I went out after I graduated from high school. I went out and I worked at just about every radio and TV station in town. And I finally made it to the big station in town, KTKT, the big rock and roll station, the great station that just my goal in life was to work for this station. And I finally made it up there. And you know, you remember a couple of things. I just got to tell you these things. You know, and this really has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but I feel like I want to tell you these things anyway. You know, I'll never forget in 1963, I was working for the station, had a great job as a disc jockey. You know, I was on every night from 6 to 9 o'clock. I had the Top 40 show on Saturday afternoon. And, oh, Jim Arnold came in. Hey, Jim, how are you? Anyway, so it was just terrific. I had this great job and everything. And one day, as I was driving into, I was going to school at the same time. As I was driving into school, I was at the corner of Wilmot and Broadway, and I'll never forget that. I was at the corner of Wilmot and Broadway, and I was listening to KTKT, the radio station I was working for, and there was a Kinney shoe commercial on, and in the middle of the Kinney shoe commercial, there was a news bulletin, and I thought, wow, you don't interrupt a commercial for a news bulletin, never. You know, I mean, you always can wait for that extra 15 seconds or whatever. Well, this was a bulletin that was worth interrupting a Kinney shoe commercial, and that was that John Kennedy had been shot in Dallas. And it was on November 22nd, 1963. Well, you know, any guy that's in radio, then boy, the first thing you want to do is like a magnet. You want to go down to the radio station, and you want to see what's happening. What's the radio station going to do? And there was a great dilemma as to what the station was going to do. What are they going to do? Are they going to play just the regular music? Are we just, you know, here our president's just been shot. He's been killed. We know he's dead. Are we going to play rock and roll records for the next 3 days until his funeral? Well, it was determined that we weren't going to do that. We were going to play patriotic music. So this great rock and roll station was going to play patriotic music for 3 days until the funeral. And boy, if you were depressed over Kennedy being shot, you should have listened to KTKT. Boy, you'd really be depressed, I'm here to tell you. Wow, I mean, Lee Greenwood wasn't around in those days. And you know, there are only about 5 patriotic songs. You know, you get by America the Beautiful, My Country 'Tis of Thee, Columbia Gem of the Ocean, and the Star Spangled Banner, and a couple more. I mean, that about does it. You hear those ones over and over again. The other thing I remember at the station, I got to tell you this too. The other thing I remember at the station was we used to have a disc jockey meeting every Thursday night at the station. And at this disc jockey meeting, the program director would play the new songs, all the new records that just came out. We would decide what to play the following week. And this one day, the program director says, this was in 1964, he said, now here's a new guy. He hasn't really had a big hit yet, but he's a folk singer in New York. I think his name is Bob Dylan. I guess maybe it's Dylan. Here's a new record he's got. It's called Like a Rolling Stone. And one guy jumps up and he says, oh, you can't play that. He's a communist. He's a folk singer in New York. The guy's a commie. He's left wing. You can't play that out here. And then another guy jumps up and says, what are you talking about? You know, what do you mean you can't play this? If you don't play that, it's like Hitler's book burning. And all of a sudden we're arguing. This is big argument about whether to play Bob Dylan or not. Can you believe that? Phenomenal. So anyway, well, we played Bob Dylan, and I'm sure it really didn't make any difference to his career whether KTKT in Tucson played his record or not. And so we did it, and those are just the two things I remember from that station while I was there. But anyway, I did that, and I got into radio sales, and I went up to Phoenix, and I went in radio sales up there, and then I went to work for the television station. Channel 12, the KTAR, which was the NBC television station, and I was selling airtime for the TV station, and I had just gotten married. I had a beautiful home out in North Scottsdale on an acre of property, and I was really doing well, and I had a couple of kids, and everything was really great. And so I asked the boss one day, and by the way, there was a fellow who bought the TV station. Maybe you've heard of. His name was Carl Eller. Anybody know who Carl Eller is? He's a very famous Arizona industrialist, we might say. And so he bought the station, and he bought a... He's an entrepreneur. Yeah, I don't think he's ever been an employee, actually. But anyway, so he bought the station, and he bought a whole bunch of other stations, and they would take the people who were at the other stations, at my station, and they would make them managers at all the other stations. So one day I went up to my boss, and I said, when am I going to have my chance? I was 29 years old. When am I going to have my chance to manage one of the stations? And he said, never. I said, never? No, you're not never. You're not management material. Oh, I don't understand. Well, you don't think of the big picture. My job is a salesman. I go out and I sell, and I'm a great salesman. Yeah, you're a good salesman, but you're just not management material. Trust me. Okay, well, I was so insulted by that I quit my job. And that was the last job I ever had. And that was in 1972. And I remember I went home that night, and I told my wife, I said, I quit my job today. She said, you what? I said, I quit my job today. you got to be crazy. You quit your job. What are you going to do? I said, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I'm never going to work for anybody ever again, even if I have to sell bananas. See my little banana pin here? In downtown Los Angeles. But oh, by the way, I just have to tell you this other story that, I told you about Maria Gomez in downtown Los Angeles selling the bananas to the people. And I met her. It's a true story about her. And I met her one day. She was going through, I was doing some business in LA in the early 90s. And I saw her walking through this area. And I said, how much for all your bananas? And she said, and she gave me a price, I said, I'll take them all. Oh man, she thought that was the greatest thing. One guy just bought all of her bananas at the full retail price, And then I was passing them out to all the people in there. And I was known as the Banana Man. This is in downtown LA. So every day when she'd go by that same place, she'd say, is the Banana Man here today? But I digress. Okay, so I quit my job, and the first thing I started was an advertising agency, and I got a partnership. And by the way, part of my book is I talk about the importance of partnerships. And if you ever know people that are going to get into businesses or start businesses, partnerships, they're almost more important to get the right person, even more important than marriage. I'm not kidding. You get the right partner. I had a fabulous partner. He just passed away this last year. His name was Mac Jett, and he was just terrific. He was the former advertising manager at First National Bank of Arizona. We all remember First National Bank of Arizona back in the old days. And he was the advertising manager there. And just a great guy. And he and I knew broadcasting, he knew newspapers. We just made a great combination. But we didn't have any of the real fancy advertising. We were part of what we like to term the buy or die school of advertising. And that was, hey, it's the greatest sale ever in the history of the world. This weekend only, hurry up. And next weekend it's going to be even better. One of those type of things. And so we did a lot of that stuff. But I discovered something about having an advertising agency is the fact that you had 20, instead of having one boss, I had 20 bosses because every one of my clients was my boss. And if I did well, they made the money. And if I did bad for them, I got fired. Well, that wasn't such a good deal. Well, I went out and one of the things about being in the advertising agency business was the fact that what you got to learn about a whole lot of other businesses. And of course, I just love to start businesses. Well, one day I had a guy come to me and he said, I bought this art gallery in Scottsdale, and I had it for a while, and then I sold it to somebody, and then I got it back because he failed to make his payments on it. He said, I don't want to be in the art gallery business. He said, I want to have a going out of business sale. Now, you guys are good at this type of thing. Why don't you have a going out of business sale at my art gallery? Well, who ever heard of a going out of business sale at an art gallery? I said, well, aren't most of the paintings are like on consignment and everything? He said, no. I have paintings where I own all the paintings. Oh, okay. So we ran television, radio, newspaper, and everything, and it was so fabulous. We had so many people there over the weekend. I mean, they bought everything he had. Masters Art Gallery of Scottsdale closes its doors. The total remaining stock will be sold out. First come, first served. Save 70, 60, 90, 100, 150% and more. And every oil painting is including the frame. And so he came back the next Monday and he said, my God, he said, it was the most fabulous thing I've ever heard anybody ever do. He said, we sold out. It's finding new ways to do new things. And what did we learn? We learned that people are desperate to find good, low-priced oil paintings. They wanted that. And nobody ever supplied that. They didn't like the idea of having to go into a fancy art gallery and looking at high-priced paintings, but they liked going out of business sale. So I told them, I said, look at this. I said, this is the most fabulous deal you could ever imagine. I said, let's take a whole bunch of oil paintings. I said, one of my favorite test markets is Tucson. Now, we're up in Phoenix at the time. So I said, we'll go to the Ramada Inn in Tucson, and we'll have a big art sale over the weekend. Saturday and Sunday only at the Ramada Inn. Thousands of oil paintings, values to $200, $300, only between $49 and $99, including frame. It was fabulous. People were lined up around the block again. There's a whole new business. We have the traveling art sale. I'm sure you guys have seen it. The 2-day only art sale. If you're real art aficionados and you love real fine art, I'm sure you hate this thing. But we did this. Is the microphone working, do you think? Did Jay go out and get some batteries? Jay's got new batteries in my microphone. Why wouldn't that be nice? Ooh, look at the red lights on too. Does that mean it's going to work? Oh man, this is great. You're going to hate this. I'll probably be nice and loud.
Where'd you get the art from?
Where did I get the art from? The art came from the Orient. The art came, how about that phone? How about that, fans? Oh, I love a microphone. I just feel so good here in front of a microphone. But anyway, so we got the oil paintings. They were all from Korea and places like that. And the, you know, like you have, you know, authors have pen names. Well, these people had pen names too. So instead of being Kim Park, his name was James Grant, for example. But they were quality oil paintings, and we would send them pictures, and they would paint like we would send them a picture of the Grand Canyon, and they would paint the Grand. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I had them all over my house. It was fabulous. But anyway, so we did this. It was a sensational deal, and they were commonly known as starving artists' art sales. And you've probably, like I said, you've seen them. They've been doing them for years. We did the first one. We started that concept. We did them all over the world. I was in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, doing commercials for these things. You know, I mean, they were just, it was fabulous. Just an incredible thing that lasted for a long, long time. But so that was one of the things. We're always looking for new ways to do new things. Well, my media buyer and I decided to leave the regular advertising agency, and so we started another business called Media Arts International. And when we did, we started the real estate seminar business, where we had people going out and telling people how to buy property with no money down, and you know, turn it into an instant income with a stroke of a pen. So we were doing this, and the whole idea of this business was that we would advertise to come to the hotel ballroom to listen to this lecture, and then the man would give the lecture, and the people at the end of the lecture would buy the home study course on how to do this thing, okay? And it usually cost around $300 to $400. So it wasn't cheap, but the people loved it, and they did it, and they bought it, and it was absolutely sensational. So once again, you know, new ways to do new things. Now this was, you know, when we were doing the oil paintings, the television business was really incredible. It was the golden age of television advertising. And what I mean by that is that there was no VCR, there was no cable, there was no internet, there was nothing but 3 or 4 stations in every town. And so what you would do is the people would turn on the TV set and they'd go sit back on the sofa. There was no remote clicker. They would set it on one channel. Every station had a fabulous audience, so we could take the oil paintings and go into a town, and everybody knew we were there. It was absolutely fabulous. There was no competition for television advertising. Well, you know, that's changed today. Well, we discovered, Nancy and I, we were talking. Nancy's my media buyer. We were talking about how things are changing in the business, and all of a sudden, this was in 1984, and all of a sudden, there's this new thing called cable TV. Now, I was really smart about cable TV. You know, when somebody told me about cable, I said, you know what? Never going to work. Nobody's going to pay for cable. Why on earth would they pay for cable TV when they can get it free over the air? Well, I guess I was wrong about that one, along with a whole bunch of other stuff, I might add. But, okay, so now I'm telling you that we were in the seminar business. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, gee, there must be a different way to do this. So if we had, instead of having people come to the seminar, what if I recorded the seminar and ran that on television, and then the people didn't have to go anywhere, and they just bought whatever you advertised right off the television? They called up an 800 number and used their credit card. Wow, is that going to work? Well, you know, people said, yo, you're crazy. That's never going to work. Even our guy, there was a fellow by the name, not the singer Paul Simon, but there was a guy named Paul Simon who was our #1 real estate guru, and he was terrific, and people just loved him, and they bought a lot of his stuff. And he was saying, what are you doing with this thing? I said, I'm recording your lecture so I can put it on television, and people can go and buy right off the television. So we decided we were going to test this concept. So I made a program, and we ran it in little Lowell, Massachusetts. And I picked Lowell because they happened to have a lot of people there watched cable TV. And it was really terrific. So, and I advertised on the radio, and I said, watch this program, learn about real estate, you know, at 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning on your local cable channel, channel 17 or whatever it was. And we did that. And when that was over with, the business, it was so sensational. We made tons of money just from that one little market. Well, you know, if you did it in that small market, what would happen if you took that and you put it on national cable television? Wow, what a sensational idea this is. New ways to do new things. And so I told Nancy, I said, okay, why don't you buy some program time on some of the national cable channels? You know, like the USA Network. All these cable channels, they're just new. They're starting up. You know, they're not in a lot of homes yet. And so she said, well, you know, I call these people, they don't even know how to sell us the program time. They want to sell us spot time. They want to sell us 30-second and 60-second spots. And I said, well, see what you can do. So she finally said, I bought a whole bunch of programs for this weekend. And it was in November of 1984. And I said, fine. So we got the money together and we advertised on national cable TV. We put our program on the air that weekend. Oh, there was one other thing. There was this brand new newspaper that had just started. And I said, you know, we ought to run a little ad in that paper. And that paper was USA Today. Wow. It had just started, and so we ran an ad that said, you know, watch these networks at these times. And it ran over the weekend. And the next Monday, I called Nancy, because she was in charge of the telephone and all that stuff. I said, well, how do we do over the weekend? And there's this long pause, and I can hear her say that to this day. She said, Ray, we sold over $1 million worth of courses over the weekend. It was absolutely sensational. Well, we did that, and that was the beginning of the infomercial industry. Nobody had ever done that before, ever, and we started it. So we got the money, and we had access to that $1 million. You know, this isn't something that's going to be, you know, come to us someday. These were credit card sales. That money was in the bank immediately. So we had $1 million in the bank right after that weekend that we could take out and buy more time and put on more things, and it was absolutely incredible. Well, we immediately began producing other shows besides the real estate program. And I mean, we had tons of other programs. And we bought a lot of time. We were selling a home study course, and that's another thing about this. We were selling home study. We weren't selling $20 kitchen gadgets. The things we were selling were $300 items. So it was phenomenal. And we had all kinds of programs. We had Charles Givens, Wealth Without Risk, Zig Ziglar, Success Tips, Bobby Singer, How to Win at Blackjack, Tom Hopkins, Learn How to Sell Real Estate, Shad Helmstetter, Self-Talk for Weight Loss, Rita Davenport, Time Management for Women, Hal Morris, Get Rich with Penny Stocks. You probably don't remember any of these people, but at the time, these were huge, and every time we would run, they would be absolutely sensational.
Where did you get
Well,
thousands of them to sell over a weekend? I mean, physically.
beg pardon?
Where did you get thousands of physical copies of things?
We got a lot of physical copies because we made a deal with the people who had those. In other words, the guy who had the penny stocks program, he had the course, the home study course on how to do that. Now, one of the most important, you know, and my Lindstrom's laws here, I have 22 Lindstrom's laws, and one of my laws here is tell the world about your success. Now, a lot of people disagree with this, but believe me, I think it's fabulous. This is number 7, Lindstrom's law number 7. Tell the world about your success. Let people know what you do. When you have a success, make it known. Tell your friends, get publicity, shout it out to the world. Why? First, because it makes you king of whatever you're doing. You are the pioneer. You did it first. You are the incredible person who came up with the idea. And that brings you to the all-important second point. It brings opportunities your way. People hear about what you're doing, and they might have a product that they want to promote or a clever idea that maybe they can't do themselves. So all these other people, they read about this thing, they heard about it, and you know, we had stories, and there were stories in Forbes magazine and Advertising Age and all these publications. They came to us and said, gee, I've got this great program. Could you guys do it for me? Because we really don't know how to do it, and you've got all the airtime locked up. And I said, you know, absolutely, to most of them. Now, there were a few people that came to us, and you know, like, for example, this one guy came in and he says, you know, I've got this program, you know, to give people a better life. He says, you know, help them out in their day-to-day activities. I said, listen, Tony Robbins, I don't think that that's something that we're interested in. That one right there cost me a lot of money, I'm here to tell you. And I didn't even remember that, but somebody reminded me. They were in my office the day that he came in. And, you know, but these people, they were coming in all the time with these ideas, and I had to decide what to use and what not to use. There was another guy his name was Claude Olney, and he was a professor at Arizona State University. And he developed this program called Where There's a Will, There's an A. Anybody remember that program? It was to help, boy, it's a really amazing piece. This thing ran thousands of times. But anyway, it was to help raise your child's IQ and have them get better grades. And I told him, you know, I don't think people are interested in that. I think they just want to make money and lose weight. Well, he went out and he got somebody to produce the program. He got, and he had John Ritter, if you remember him, and Michael Landon were both hosts of that show. And I had heard that he had sold about $300 million worth of it. But I didn't think it would work. What can I tell you about that? Well, because we had all this publicity and everything, then Wall Street came calling. And people were interested in, at this time, this was in 1986. And in 1986, we sold about $200 million worth of these home study courses on national cable television. It was sensational. And everybody knew that we were doing this. And so Wall Street came along, and at that time, there was a big deal called home shopping. Just started. And the stock in the home shopping network and QVC, they were all just starting. The stock in it was terrific. So the Wall Street guys said, is there any way you can come up with a shopping thing? So we came up with a program called Money Mania, which was a live 6-hour bingo show every night on cable TV that lasted from midnight to 6. And in between pulling the balls, we were advertising products like Home Shopping Network, but we had the people because they wanted to play the bingo. So it worked out great. And so we were made an offer by a stock exchange, a New York Stock Exchange company, offered to buy our company, and I was thrilled to sell out, believe me. And so I sold out, and my partner and I actually both sold out. And that was in 1986. And, you know, I mean, you talk about great stories. Nancy, my partner in this, in Media Arts International, she started with me when I was in the advertising agency business. And she was making $675 a month. After she was a partner in this business and she sold out, she was a multimillionaire. And she stayed with that company. She didn't leave like I did. She stayed with the new company. And they were paying her over $1 million a year to be the manager of it, which was just absolutely sensational. Well, you know, even though I was out of the business, people would still come up to me and ask me advice on different things. And I was, you know, I mean, life was pretty good, you know, had all this money all of a sudden, and I just was looking for new stuff to do. And one day the doorbell rings, and I go to the door, and there's this guy standing there, and he's got a cardboard box under his arm. And he said, "Hi, I'm Ron Popeil." I don't know if you ever heard of me or not, but I used to have a thing on television called Popeil's Pocket Fisherman and the Buttoneer. The problem with buttons is they always pop off. Wasn't that it, Tony? And so he said, you know, I just had a divorce. He said, and the only thing I was left with was a warehouse full of these old products. And I said, well, you know what? I sold out. I've got a non-compete agreement. There's nothing I can really do. I said, go find somebody else that. One of the things he had was this food dehydrator, little plastic food dehydrator. I said, well, you know, give it a try. You know, make your own infomercial and put it on. And I heard that he sold about $500 million worth of that food dehydrator. Remember, he had the spray-on hair. He had all kinds of stuff like that. But he did all kinds of things. And there's one more story that I want to tell you about the infomercial business. Even though I was gone from that, I don't know if any of you remember, there was a congressman in Arizona. His name was Sam Steiger. Anybody remember Sam Steiger? Okay, and he was a right-wing Republican, and boy, oh boy, he was just dedicated to beating those commies. That's what he wanted to do. And he ran in 1976 for the Senate in Arizona, and he lost to Dennis DeConcini, who was a Tucsonan. But anyway, this was in around 1990. He called me up one day and he said, I hear you're in the infomercial business. He said, I got a project I want to talk to you about. He said, come on over and see me. So he was in Phoenix and I was in Phoenix. I went over to his office and he said, you know, there's this big war going on right now between Afghanistan and Russia. You know, and he says the Russians are bringing, you know, they've got their helicopters and they've got all this heavy equipment that they're bringing in. And he says, and yet those freedom fighters in Afghanistan, they're actually beating the Russians, you know, with shoulder-mounted rocket launchers, and they're riding on mules. They know the terrain, and they're beating this entire Russian army in Afghanistan. He said, I want, myself and some other Republicans want to get together, and we want to raise money for the Afghan freedom fighters. He said there's this young Afghan freedom fighter, and he mentioned some guy's name, you know, some Arab name, I just couldn't remember, and he says, you know, he's a young guy, and he's organizing this whole thing, and I want to raise money for him. And so he says, so what we want to do is we want to get a film crew into Afghanistan, and we'd have to go through Pakistan, get in there and take pictures of these guys on the mules and how they're beating the Russians and everything, and then we're going to solicit funds to raise money for the Afghan freedom fighters. So I said, well, you know, that does present a few challenges. I said, but hey, you know, I bet we could do that. Let me talk to some people. And I talked to a buddy of mine up in Phoenix, Maury Helly, who is a TV producer. And I said, hey, I got a real project for you this time. He said, don't tell me, what is this, car wax or some new kind of soap? I said, well, it's a little bit different than that. I said, I need you to go into Afghanistan and take some shots of freedom fighters. I said, now you go through Pakistan. And, you know, I explained the whole deal to him, and he says, wow, what a great idea. He says, you know, I bet I could do that. And he got back to me, and he gave me a price on it. And he said, okay, it would be about $30,000 or $40,000. And I said, no problem. I called Sam Steiger back, and I said, I tell you what, it's going to cost you about $30,000 or $40,000, but I think we could do it. He said, great. He said, let me get back with my people, and I'll let you know about it. So a couple weeks go by, and I haven't heard, so I call up Sam, and I said, hey, why don't you... I said, what's the deal? You got this? You got the money together or what? He said, oh boy. He said, you know, it's tough because none of these guys want to be known as the money men behind this deal. They want to kind of keep it hush hush. He says, but I'm working on it. Don't worry about it. Okay. Well, you know how you're involved. I was involved in a lot of stuff. So, you know, as time goes on, you know, you kind of forget about things. And I actually kind of forgot about the whole deal. Well, I kind of forgot about it. As a matter of fact, I never gave it another thought until 9/11/2001. And then I remembered that young freedom fighter, the one we were going to raise money for. His name was Osama bin Laden. Well, listen, folks. That was Sam Steiger. That wasn't me. God rest his soul. Wanted to beat those commies, boy, any way possible. Well, anyway, I was done with the infomercial business, and the next thing that I thought would be fabulous would be, I always wanted to get in. There was this new thing that was just starting. It was called the 900 number business. Anybody remember the 900 number business? You know how it worked? People would call a number, and then the phone company would charge you, and it would get on your phone bill, and then you'd pay the phone bill, and then the telephone company would pay the promoter of this thing. And I thought that was kind of a neat idea. So I ended up with one telephone line. And, you know, by the way, my book is just full of great stories. And there's a great story in there about my dealing. We almost put, do you remember a guy by the name of Morton Downey Jr.? Yeah, big loudmouth, just a horrible guy. And we almost went into business with him in the 900 number business, but it didn't quite work out. But anyway, we decided we would put together a romance line. Now, you know, I always say, don't forget, this is the time. This is before the internet. You know, we don't even remember being alive before the internet because everything, you know, it's taken over our lives. You know, but this was a time before the internet when people wanted to do dating. There was what you had, newspaper ads. I don't know. Maybe you had to actually go out and meet people in person. But anyway, so we decided we were gonna do a program on this, which was the Romance Hotline, and which was going to be a dating service for people over 30. So, you know, once again, now here's Zoom records all over again. Do you think I know anything about this, the technology or anything? I know nothing about it. So I called AT&T and I said, well, explain to me how this deal works. And so, he said, so the gal tells me, she said, well, I'm going to send a guy out and he'll install the equipment and everything in your office there. Okay, so fine. So the guy comes out and I say, okay, here's the office. I want the equipment installed. And I said, well, how long will it take? It'll take about an hour. So he said, go have a cup of coffee, come on back, and it'll be all set for you. So I go out and I come back, and the guy's sitting there. And I said, well, where's the equipment? I look at, the office is empty. There's nothing in there. He said, what's right over there? I said, there's nothing there. He said, no, look down there by the baseboard. You see that thing? I looked down there, little tiny hole about that big. He says, yeah, he said, the deal is you plug in whatever you want the people to hear, and they'll hear it, and that's it. That's all you have to do. I said, well, what do I do? He said, well, just put something in there where you can talk to the people or tell them something. I said, well, like a tape machine. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, plug in a tape machine, and then on the tape machine you can have whatever you want the people to hear. I said, well, is it just like one person or two people? Do you have to have one person? Oh, no. He says, 100,000 people can all listen at the same time. Oh, really? That's interesting. Well, anyway, so I go down to Radio Shack. This titan of industry. I go down to Radio Shack and I buy a $100 cassette player with a little plug on the end, and I plug in there. And we had people, people would be on the line. You talk about, a simple thing. People would call up. We would advertise. Call the romance hotline, and people would call up and they would hear on this tape, hello, my name is Nancy. I live in Queens, New York. I love long walks on the beach and Willie Nelson records. Please call me. I'm looking for a nice guy over 40. Okay, but then the next one would be a guy because looking for a girl. So it would be just alternating until we could have some system, where it would be interactive in some sort. It's before the internet. This is a very, very simple thing. So anyway, we plugged it in, and the business instantly was sensational. That little tiny hole in the wall, I call it my $100 million hole in the wall, turned out we ended up getting more lines. We had the Romance Connection. We had Chinese and Swedish horoscopes. And later on, Sprint and MC, new ways to do new things. We had Sprint and MCI got in the business, and then it became interactive, where you called up the Romance Hotline, and they would say, thank you for calling the Romance Hotline. If you're a man looking for a woman, press 1. If you're a woman looking for a man, press 2. Oh boy, that's sophisticated. Now they didn't have to listen, to the whole, man, woman. Now they could just listen to all of the sex that they were looking for. See, so that turned out fabulous. Well, it was with those push buttons. It was so good. This was right before the internet started. So it was the only interactive device available. It was the only interactive thing that was available anywhere. I called it the internet before the internet. And we had all kinds of stuff. And you got to remember, this is for entertainment only. We're not curing diseases or bringing peace to the world. We're just having fun, and this is entertainment only. And we've got things like the reincarnation line. Call up and find out what you were in a previous lifetime. I was watching the David Letterman show one night, and on his show he had Tico the talking dog, and I thought, oh man, we ought to put Tico on one of these lines. So I found out who the owner of Tico the talking dog was, and I paid this gal a fee for having Tico on the line. We advertised, call up and listen to a dog talk, and people called up. They loved this stuff. We had numerology, we had curse removals, we had quizzes to win money hosted by famous people. We had a movie and TV trivia quiz by Bob Denver, who was Gilligan, you remember him, nice guy. We had sports quizzes by Rollie Fingers and Hall of Fame pitcher Chick Hearn, announcer. And they would say, we would say, answer 7 questions by pushing the buttons on your phone, the interactive thing, and win $100. Well, that was fabulous, it really worked. And then, because of what I had said earlier about the publicity, it's really important to have publicity for all these things that you do, because then people come to you. Well, we were getting people that would come to us from national companies who were interested in the 900 business for theirs. Like Philip Morris came to us, and they wanted to have a 900 line to find out whether people, all this stuff is just, too much for me to understand. But they wanted to know whether people preferred chunky or creamy peanut butter. I think they were promoting Peter Pan peanut butter, if I'm not mistaken. Masters and Johnson, the people that did sex, they were interested in putting a line on of new facts that they had shown. Well, in 3 years, this whole thing was over with. The 900 business lasted for 3 years. And then it was done. And I just wish the internet would have been there at that moment when the 900 business was finished, because we could have taken all those romance lines and we could have become a Match.com or a eHarmony. But you know, I just wanted to keep on getting into new things. And you got to remember that while we're doing all these other things, you know, the infomercials and the 900 business and the oil paintings, we're also doing tons of other products at the same time. These are not just, you know, going on one after another. We're doing other things, you know, and it's just, you got to think outside the box and think of new ways to do things. For example, airport parking in Phoenix was horrible. There was no new place to find parking for people at the Phoenix airport, you know, and they said there's just no land available. Well, my partner and I, we found a piece of land. It was right there. It was hidden in plain sight that they just didn't know was there. And you know where it was? It was along the railroad tracks that ran right along the runway at Sky Harbor Airport. Yeah, it didn't look like a parking lot. When you think of a parking lot, you think of a big square lot. Well, how about a parking lot that's 60 feet wide and a mile long? You know, room for cars on both sides and a roadway in the middle. And so we leased this long, narrow parking lot from Santa Fe Railroad, and we had airport parking. We had the closest airport parking at the airport, of any place at the airport. Just new ways to do new things. And speaking about railroad things, we also discovered that, I told my buddy, I said, you know, they quit putting cabooses at the end of trains. He said, yeah, isn't that awful? You know, we always loved those cabooses. They were great, you know. I said, but you know, I discovered that they have all these cabooses in a train yard in Barstow, California. You know, we could make offices out of them. We started a company called the Custom Caboose Company where we turned these cabooses into offices. We did other things. We had a Today in Japan newspaper. We had the Hotel Room Shopping Network. This was, instead of the Home Shopping Network, we had the Hotel Room Shopping Network, where you bought items in your hotel room when you stayed in a room, and if you wanted to buy one, you saw the advertising on television, you called the operator of the hotel and said, just put it on my room charge, and it was sent to you. Just new ways to do new things. So, you know, I was an old disc jockey, and I told you about that. And you know, the dream of every old disc jockey is to own a radio station. Isn't that right? I know. We got a lot of old disc jockeys here. Maybe that's not true, but I've heard that it is. And so I ended up, and I got a couple of radio stations up in Laughlin, Nevada, which is this hot gaming area for low rollers and nickel slot players. And you know, I'm always looking for new ways to do new things. And I was at Phoenix one day, and I heard I saw in the newspaper, in the Republic, there was a little ad, and it said, watch sale, wristwatch sale at the Hilton Hotel. Thousands of watches, every one $10.99. Ooh, you know, I was thinking about what we used to do, you know, with the oil paintings, and I thought, gee, I never thought of watches. I got to go over there and see that. You know, I walk in a little tiny room, and gosh, it's just jammed with people, and they've got baskets, and they're filling up these baskets with watches and everything, and I thought, wow, this is absolutely sensational. Well, you know, in the old days, we'd go from town to town selling what we had, but now I have those radio stations in Laughlin. How about if we just were there all the time and the people kept going through? You know, because in Laughlin, there were 10,000 people every 3 days up there, a new 10,000 people. So we decided to open up a watch store in Laughlin. And, you know, but once again, I'm going to tell you, it's just like Zoom records again. What do I know about watches? I know nothing about watches. Nothing. I mean, I don't know how do they run? I mean, do you wind them up? Do they have batteries in them? I don't know anything about them. What do people like to buy? So I decided to go to this wholesale show and just, you know, ask people about the watch business. So there was a wholesale watch show, and I went to it, and nobody would pay any attention to me. They just didn't want to have anything to do with me because they were busy. They were busy selling to other people and everything. So finally, I went through all these different people, and I was so disgusted because nobody would want to talk to me. I would say, you know, I'm thinking about starting this new business, and they said, well, you know, we're busy here. Maybe come back some other time. But there was one guy, this Pakistani guy, just a great guy. His name was Ajaz Ramzan, 29 years old. He said, my family's been in the watch business for 50 years. He was the only guy in the whole show that was nice to me. He said, I tell you what, next week you come over to LA, buy some watches. I'll show you all about the business. And you want to know what? It was sensational. He helped me out. He did everything. And over the years, I bought millions of dollars worth of watches with this guy because he was nice to me. You know, it never hurts to be nice to somebody. Well, I called my old partner, Mac Jett, and I said, I tell you what, I said, you want to go in the watch business with me? He said, you bet. So he and I were in the watch business up in Laughlin, and we had this huge store in the middle of the casino. We had over 20,000 watches, all under $20. And we became so famous that every day when we went there were 100 people waiting to come in and buy watches from us. Fabulous. We added more stores in the casino. We sold everything, sunglasses, jewelry. We had a candy store, T-shirts. We had Beanie Babies. We had just everything imaginable. And we became so famous that the CBS Evening News came and they did a story about us. And Bill Geist, I don't know if you've ever seen Bill Geist on CBS Sunday Morning or on the CBS Evening News. He's a terrific guy. Even mentioned me in his book I was so happy about. And he came and he spent some time with us and he did a great story on us. And then the NBC Today Show comes and they say, we want an exclusive deal to have you on during the 2 time changes every year. Well, this is perfect. Here we have to change the watches and clocks for 20,000 watches. You know, they would always have a news story about this deal, about the time change. Nobody ever had a good visual of it. This was finally a visual. And they were real happy, so the NBC Today Show, we granted them the exclusive to come to little tiny Laughlin, Nevada. And they were there, and we'd have to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning, because, you know, at 4 o'clock in the morning in Laughlin was 7 o'clock back in New York. We were on the air live. It was absolutely fantastic. Well, you know, everything changes. You know, things change. You know, you just never know what's going to happen. If I would have told you 20 years ago, if I would have told you 20 years ago that Kodak was going to go bankrupt because people were going to be taking pictures with their telephone, you would have said I was crazy, right? Well, you know, in Nevada, all of a sudden the Indians got gaming outside of Nevada. All of a sudden you can buy a watch at Walmart for $20. Well, and then all of a sudden, there's this new thing called the internet. So things have changed, you know, and we had a nice run up there, and it was time to sell out. And so I decided to sell out, and guess who bought my business? My friend Ajaz Ramzan, the guy that was nice to me. He bought my whole business. Fabulous. Still a friend to this day. So I decided to retire and come back to Tucson, from whence I came. And my dad was in his 90s, and I thought, yeah, it'd be great. You know, I'll come back here and see my dad. And my dad was a great guy. And I'm going to tell you one more story. You know, my dad, he was always a real positive thinker and just a wonderful person. He was just a few days short of his 97th birthday when he died. And I had just finished cleaning out his apartment, and I was putting away his last 3 boxes of personal items in my storeroom. You know, old photos, diplomas, special letters, you know, real family keepsakes. I added those boxes to my personal boxes, and I thought to myself, now when I die, these will all go to my daughter. Now, since I have no grandchildren, when she passes away, somebody will look at this and say, what is all this junk, and throw it away. It will be like we didn't exist. I tell you, there's nothing sadder than going into an antique or collectibles store and seeing baskets of pictures of people you don't know who they are, or family albums with no names on them. I think that's horrible, because I think that people ought to be remembered. And I thought, aha! I need to create a website where people can post all their family keepsake items and make them available for future generations, where they would stay virtually forever or as long as civilization exists. There was that thing they branded the cloud. Well, what is the cloud? You know, I was talking about the cloud this, the cloud that. Well, you know what the cloud is? The cloud is a bunch of computers in a warehouse somewhere. It's not a cloud up there, but they've got, you know, this mystical thing called the cloud. And who knows how long they'll be around? You know, the internet as we know it, you know, it's incredible. As we know the internet, it's only been around a little over 20 years. Well, 20 years from now, is it still going to be around? 50 years, what about 100 years? Is there going to be some brand new thing and the internet's going to be gone? You know, I wanted to create a place where people could store their precious items, and we promised them that they will always be there no matter how technology changes over the years. So instead of a cloud, I said, let's take their things and put them in a room where they have their own room on the internet. This is not something temporary like a cloud, but they're forever room. So I created a site called postedforever.com. Aha! Move over, Mark Zuckerberg. Ray Lindstrom is going to be on the scene with the world's most important website. This is going to be it. This is going to put Facebook and Twitter and all these other ones to shame. This is going to be the big one. This is going to be it. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to run it for 4 years, and then I'm going to sell it to Google or Amazon for $2 billion. That was my plan. Well, in order to do that, I needed a special entity to do that because, you know, you want to keep these things forever. You want something that's going to last forever. I wanted something where I could promise people it would last for 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. And even if the internet was different, even if there was no internet, that their items would still be around in whatever form was popular in those days, in the days to come. So I created this thing, and I went and I talked with a good friend of mine by the name of Scott Vaughn. Scott's here tonight, and he and I talked about creating this, and he created a nonprofit organization that would be affiliated with Posted Forever, and this organization would ensure the longevity of everybody's items. So if you posted a picture of your dad in your room on the internet, it would be there in 10,000 years. So I went out, I found somebody to build the site, and Zoom records again. What do I know about this? I can't build a site like this. So I found some people to build the site. It was not easy, but we did it. And it was there. It was postedforever.com. And I want to tell you, I did advertising. I advertised all over the internet. I had banners and advertising. I advertised on Facebook, on Twitter, and Google. I was interviewed by national radio hosts. Stories were written about my new project in print and on the internet. Forbes, who always had something to say about my projects, they did a feature on it. And I'm going to tell you folks right now, I had never had response for any of my projects like I had for this one ever. After all my advertising and publicity, and with 7 billion people in the world, of which 3.5 billion are on the internet. How many subscribers do you suppose I got? In this, the world's most important website. This was something that was going to put Twitter and Facebook to shame. What do you suppose? You think I got 1 billion responses? 1 million? 100,000? How about 10,000? I mean, come on. This had to be absolutely fabulous. Well, I want to read the part in the book where I tell you what happened. And the response, and when I tell you, that once again I'm going to say that I never had response for any of my projects like I had for this one. Never. And I'm going to read from my book. What happened? I did not get 1 subscriber. Not one. 3 billion people on the internet. Advertising. Oh, of course, in my definition of success, I had succeeded because I created it. But boy, what an absolute flop. It was incredible. I mean, nobody cared about it. I mean, nobody wanted it. I changed my advertising. Nothing worked. I put it out there for free. I still didn't get anybody. I mean, they didn't want it for free. I almost thought about maybe giving them money to join. I mean, even in the old days when I did an infomercial, if it turned out to be a flop, you know, I'd still get a few people buying it. You know, maybe a half a dozen anyway. But nothing? Wow, this was incredible. The world's most important website, Bupkis, Zero, and Zilch. It was so bad, it actually was funny. You could probably walk up to 1,000 women, strangers, and ask them if they wanted to have sex with you and get at least 1 or 2 to say yes. But with Posted Forever, no way. Nobody was interested. I'm actually laughing as I write this. Unbelievable. And I tell you, I'm still just a little less than $1 billion short of being a billionaire. So, and then Lindstrom's law number 21 is when it's over, move on. Yes, friends, you can tweak it here and there, but when it's done, it's done. In the case of my project, we don't want it, not even for free. Move on. So there goes my chance to have Bill Gates type fame. I guess I won't be a billionaire or just almost a billionaire. Oh well, maybe next time. What's the next project? You know what the next project is? My book, and I'm done. It's success. It's a success. I'm finished. Thank you. Thank you all. And I can give it away tonight. How about that, huh? Now, I don't have to pay you to take it at all, do I? I told my friend Dave Slavin, he said, what about signing the book? I said, if you want to sign the book, it's $5. He said, well, I'm not going to pay $5. He said, no. I said, no, I want to pay you $5 if I can sign it. Anyway, I thank you very much for coming out on this rainy night. It's been great, really. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good job, Ray.
Whew. Yes, I tell you. That's something.
I haven't laughed so hard and so long. Oh my God.
I knew you know.